Welcome, I'm your host Lee Adams, and today we have the final farewell conversation with outgoing Upper St. Clair Athletic Director, Mr. Ted Peterson. Ted, it's great to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Lee. It's my pleasure.
Now, I just want to start basically talk about where you come from, where you're from. I guess it's Momence, Illinois.
Correct.
And where is that?
It's about 40 miles due south of Chicago, Illinois, and a small agricultural community where I grew up. And then, you know, I joke that I had to go towards town to go hunting because I was 8 miles out of town, 8 miles out of Momence. And I also add that, you know, we didn't get Monday night football till about Wednesday. You know,
So
it was a great place to grow up.
Small town. What was the graduating class size?
It was 95 my
95.
senior year, and we were the largest at that point the largest graduating class ever.
Really?
Yes.
So everybody knew everybody.
Pretty much so.
Yeah, yeah. What was it like there? What were your memories about growing up in Momence?
Well, I had the privilege, I think it was a distinct privilege of growing up in the country. I grew up on a farm, and I just thrived on that life. I learned how to work hard there for neighbors. I baled hay and worked with livestock. I just really enjoyed that. But it was because of that I didn't start my football career or sports career to my 9th grade year.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because, boy, kids start much earlier these days.
They do.
They do. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But how about your family? Talk a little bit about your family.
Well, I have an older sister and 2 younger brothers. And we grew up, of course, all out in the country, and had great parents. And I had some wonderful friendships that I made during school and sports in particular. And I'm looking to get back and renew some of those.
So your dad was a farmer?
He was a farmer truck driver.
Farmer truck driver. So you're getting up early in the morning and you got things to do.
Absolutely. I mean, he would get up at 3 in the morning, make 4 trips to Chicago, and be back home around 6 o'clock. I mean, he was a very hard-working man, so never remember him staying home a day or missing a day sick. So I had great role models for parents.
Yeah, so that's what I was just going to say. Well, that's a heck of a role model to see growing up.
It sure was.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what they talk about Midwestern values. What do you think that means?
Well, you know what, I like to think that those people out there in the breadbasket of the United States, they're the salt of the earth. They would just do anything for you. It's a real strong sense of community, and if there was any adversity that would hit any particular family, they would surround you in a big way and lift people up. I met some friends in South Dakota that 30 years ago. I've stayed in touch, and one of them, one of their sons had a terrible accident, and there was about, the next day, there was about 60 individual farmers were there baling his hay, cutting his wheat crop, and on. And it was just a phenomenal outpouring of, you know, love and caring for this family. And that's true among, you know, the agricultural community, I think.
Has it, you know, and then when you move to a big city like this, how does that impact you, you know, in your life when you grow up around that?
It was a little strange. I like John Kolb. John Kolb was a 13-year veteran of the Pittsburgh Steelers, great offensive tackle. And he, like myself, we would walk downtown and we'd pass people and we'd say hi. Well, people don't usually say hi to one another walking downtown Pittsburgh for obvious reasons, I guess. And that was a little different, but I tell you what, the people of Western Pennsylvania are outstanding. And I have found them to be, you know, the salt of the earth people too, great values. And it has been a wonderful experience to spend 31 years here.
Wow, 31 years. Now, you say you started playing sports in 9th grade because you were working prior to that? Is that
correct? And not only was I working, but my parents were working. It would be more difficult for them to get me to practice on a regular basis. So, you know, that's just how we handled it. And I was able to go out, you know, was totally on my own decision I wanted to go out and play football, primarily because my 5 closest friends had played since they were players, and they had played since they were 7. they'd played 7 years before I played it down. So it was, I was way behind. It was, you know, kind of a humiliating experience for me.
So you're starting from behind the eight
Way,
ball.
way behind.
Way behind.
You know, I'm just glad I never quit, and because it was a struggle. I certainly was behind the eight ball, so to speak.
Did you think of quitting?
Absolutely. The only reason why I played as a freshman probably because we were a small school and only had about 23 kids on the team, so they had to play me somewhere.
Yeah.
But you know what? And I can't understand why exactly, but quitting has not been a part of my nature. It's not something I choose to do. It's just something that I live out for some reason, and I don't tend to quit. So.
Well, so you start in 9th grade and you start to play, but I read somewhere that you were not a die-hard football guy, that you liked different sports. Is that true?
Well, let me tell you this. I didn't spend too many afternoons sitting in front of the television watching football. We did like college football, which was interesting, and back then it was really a neat game. But anyway, I didn't know that much about it, and you know, it wasn't until I got involved that I learned. So from that perspective, again, I was way behind.
And so Moments being this small school, I guess that gave you an opportunity. I mean, if it was Upper St. Clair, it might have been a different story.
It would have been.
It would have been a different story.
And I, as I look back, it would have been way different. I would have been much better sooner had I have started in the 7th grade, maybe 7th, 8th grade. I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, yeah. Now, what kind of school was Moments? You know, and maybe comparing it to an Upper St. Clair in terms of academics and the surroundings and the atmosphere and sports. Kind of compare the two.
That would be hard for me to do because I don't really know our statistics from those years, but I do know Upper St. Clair's where 98% of the student population go on to college. I don't know what it was like in our graduating class, but I assume it was way short of that.
Yeah.
I'm just very fortunate and very blessed that I was offered an athletic scholarship where college was not on my horizon either. I knew I was going to be successful because I knew I would work hard at whatever I chose to do and climb to the top of my profession, but I couldn't see going to school another 4 years. However, getting the scholarship and an opportunity to continue to play football gave me that opportunity. And then it's at Eastern Illinois where I went to school that I became a lifelong learner, and I really enjoyed studies.
Well, you said you knew you were going to be successful. Where did you get that attitude?
I don't know. Again, it was one of those inbred things that I just knew I was gonna do something well. I think because I learned at a very early age that you can work to win. You know, it doesn't matter how much talent you have. We all have 24 hours in the day. It's what you do with it, you know. I have a quote on my bulletin board. We reap our own destiny within reason, I believe that. We become what we do. So whatever you do on a regular basis, you develop good habits, you can expect good results.
So I guess, you know, your role model, your father, had pretty good habits.
Absolutely.
You know, so I guess that was just a great thing to be
It
around.
was, and my grandparents on both sides as well, and my mother. So I had role models. They were incredibly honest and hardworking people, and you know, I learned a great deal from them.
So would you say they are your most influential role models as a young person?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, before I left the house, I had really learned those things well through not what they said, but how they lived.
Yeah, gotcha. Now, sports, you started playing football in 9th grade. What other sports did you play?
Well, I ended up playing I started growing tall, and I was only about 5'9", 110 pounds soaking wet as a freshman, but I started growing. In my junior year, I sprouted to about 6'3", 205 as a junior. The basketball coach kind of courted me to come out and try the team, and I did. It was a pretty good experience. I really lacked the ball control skills that you need to compete well, but being tall and athletic, I could rebound and shoot, and you know, it was good.
So that was the first year you played basketball, junior year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of a tough. You couldn't do that here at Upper St. Clair.
Right.
Well, you could if you were a tall physical specimen.
Yeah.
There, you might have a role, but
Right.
it wouldn't be a great one
Right.
or a big one.
Right. And so you played basketball, football, anything else?
I dabbled in track. Found out I couldn't throw the shot put very well, and although I did throw the discus. How about this? We had a track program with no track. You know, I hear Aliquippa has the same thing. Of course, we weren't Aliquippa, but.
Yeah.
They run out in their parking lot and do their baton handoffs in their parking lot. They don't have a track, and I think they've won some WPIAL track titles. But anyway, I dabbled in that, but didn't. I don't even think I lettered.
No, you said you went to Eastern Illinois. Were you recruited by many schools, or what was that situation?
Well, that's easy to say. That was the only scholarship offer that I think I had maybe a look from Arkansas State, but Eastern Illinois was the only one. There was a connection there. You'll like this. One of the coaches was named Jesse James, and he was a Momence graduate, so he took an interest in me, and I think they thought I might have some potential. Certainly, I wasn't even the best player on my team, as I can recall, but I had some growth potential, and they took a chance on me.
I see. And so that was an easy decision to make, although you were thinking you weren't going on to college.
Well, I was kind of a backward. This is interesting. I was kind of a backward kid at the time, and I wasn't real assertive. But when they first offered me a half scholarship, and I said no. I can't do that. I saw how hard my parents worked, and I wasn't going to have them pay for college, even half of a scholarship on me when I really didn't know what I wanted to study. I didn't want to waste their money, and and then they came back and said, well, we'll give you a full ride, and I said, okay, fine.
Interesting.
So what's interesting is what I would have missed out on had they not have come back and said, we'll give you a full ride.
And you would have never known that.
I never would have known that. I guess not. But knowing what I know now, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if they hadn't have done that.
Yeah, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Any high school coaches that had any impact on you, or teachers?
You know what? None stand out, but we had a lot of good ones. You know, we had a lot of good ones, and teachers are very influential. And our football coach was a hard, tough man, very successful, and you know, he probably prepared me for college, and eventually for Chuck Knoll, who was a tough man in his own right.
Right, and we're going to talk about him. Now, Eastern Illinois, talk a little bit about that and your experience there.
Well, our best year ever, we were 5-6. And I can remember at the end, that was my senior year, we started the year 5-0. 5-0 ranked fourth in the nation. Our quarterback, we ran an option. Our quarterback broke his arm, and we had really no alternative quarterback, and we lost the next 6 games. And I was devastated because I was really sold out to the sport, and I worked hard for that. And then the next year they were 1-10. Then the following year, I was with the Steelers those next 2 years. Then the following year after that, they were 12-2, won the national championship. They brought in Daryl Mudra and a grad assistant who was there when I was there named Mike Shanahan, now the head coach of the Denver Broncos. And so, you know, Mike has made the university famous. Later on, my brother played for the team 10 years later. He's 10 years younger than me. And Sean Payton, the head coach of the Saints, graduated there. He was his quarterback, a record-setting quarterback. Brad Childress, he didn't graduate there, but he attended it there. He was there when I was there as well, quarterback, head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. And finally, Tony Romo graduated there a couple years, and I think he smashed some of Sean Payton's records, and he's doing pretty well himself.
How about that?
So,
was it tough going on to college, growing up on a farm like you did? I mean, how tough was that transition for you?
It was tough in that I couldn't wait to get home for the holidays.
Homesick.
You know, yeah, a little homesick. The only time I was homesick is the first 2 weeks of camp. when they're, you know, beating the heck out of you on the football field and there's no one else on campus. It's kind of a brutal life. And then when the rest of the student body arrive and things get back to normal, it's a lot more doable, I guess. So
tough. It was a tough transition.
Yeah.
No,
But you know what I can remember too is how much I look forward to getting home for the holidays. Thanksgiving would be our first opportunity. And now I can tell you this, I don't know if I could go to school year round. And that's what they ask of athletes today. If you sign up for a full scholarship at Penn State, you go to summer school. And you know, that type of commitment would be very difficult for me.
Yeah, I understand.
I enjoyed my summers a lot.
Yeah, I'll bet. Now, when was there any indication for you that the pros were interested in you?
I don't know when that happened. I think I may have received a letter or two, maybe my junior year, but it happened all of a sudden when we got a new coaching staff. John Constantinos was the head coach. He was an assistant under Lou Holtz at NC State, and he came in and I was a tight end at the time. Started my junior year about 2-3 games at tight end. Then they moved me to center. I was devastated. I wanted to quit, wanted to transfer somewhere because, you know, when you're a tight end, you get to catch the ball once in a while, and you think you might be kind of special. It's fun. Yeah. And then to move into the center of the line where even your mother can't see you out there, it was hard, but it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me once again because, you know, I was a tight end. I ran a 4.75 40. I might not have had the skills to play at that level in the pros, but as a offensive lineman, I certainly met the prototype of the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Dallas Cowboys. They were highly interested in me as well.
So that was the two teams.
They were a lot of teams showed interest, but those were the two mostly interested. And I have to say that the Dallas Cowboys were more interested than the Steelers by the mailings and the phone calls.
I see. And I believe it was the 77 draft, I believe. You
Correct.
were picked in round 4, the 93rd pick in the draft.
Correct.
By the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yes.
Now, where were you when you heard that news?
Good question. Again, I think I was a physical education major, health and driver's ed minor, and I was out behind the stadium teaching a course in motorcycle safety. And someone came up and told the instructor, and the instructor let me go and go kind of talk to my parents and stuff. So I was in class during the time.
What was your reaction and your parents' reaction?
You know what, we were excited. We knew apparently that I would be drafted, and no one really knew, and no one knows how high that's going to be. I find out now from Art Rooney Jr. that, no, I found out from Radakovich, Dan Radakovich, my first offensive line coach, that Coach Noel, after he worked me out personally, flew into Eastern Illinois. He wanted to draft me in the first round, but the other coaches said, no, we can hold off and get him at a later round, you know, because
who wanted to draft you?
Chuck Noel
Wanted to draft you in the first round.
in the first round because he had just gone to Michigan. There was a tight end there. Give me some time to think. Mike, somebody was a first-round draft pick by the Bears, and they liked him, but they liked me better after they tried me out, and believe me, that was quite a workout. And but anyway, that cost me thousands of dollars. That I dropped about 4 rounds.
What kind of workout is that? I'm just curious. What do you?
Well, when Dan Radakovich is doing it, it's a workout that's just short of the point of death. I mean. There's this one exercise called mirror dodge. It's a great exercise drill for mobility and athletic and for assessing athletic ability, and it's something that I would use again today if I coach football. And it's extremely physically taxing, and I was just dying out there in the afternoon. They caught me off guard. I didn't know I was going to be working out. And they would have defensive backs. It would be like I was the offensive lineman. Instead of having another lineman over there, even a defensive lineman, a gifted one, they would have defensive backs that I had to try to pass protect against. And I was just like I said, dying, but not being a quitter, I would not hold up my hand and say, can I take a breather here? And I can remember Chuck saying, Rad, 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 that's enough. He had to jump in because he knew, I was about ready to die.
Do they import defensive backs for that workout?
Well, no, they just grabbed some around, some of our DBs at Eastern. And of course, having the Pittsburgh Steelers there, these guys are working their butts off because they might get a look too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How about that? Interesting. I didn't know they did that. Now, so you hear you're drafted by the Steelers. Did you have any notion, or what did you hear about the city of Pittsburgh? Or what were your thoughts coming here?
I guess I had none, except I started looking at the team, seeing who I would be competing against, looking at, again, John Kolb, who was the strongest man in the National Football League, had a big beard at that time, looked like a beast of a man, turned out to be one of my best friends. And one of the reasons why I think I was able to make the team, because he befriended me, and we've had a long-standing relationship since then.
Interesting. So I guess you went to St. Vincent Latrobe for your
first
training camp.
I did. I drove from our farm in Illinois, packed up my brand new Pontiac Grand Prix 1977, paid $6,700 for it out of my bonus of $13,000, and headed for camp. And I forgot my fan, and you couldn't buy one anywhere because it was about 98 degrees every day and almost 98% humidity. It was brutal. And we didn't have air conditioning at the time, or even phones in our room, or popsicle breaks, as Bill Cowher brought in. And we had 6 weeks of was that right? 9 weeks of preseason. We had 6 preseason games and not 4. And we came in 2 weeks before the veterans, or rather 1 week before the veterans, and we were there with them 2 weeks as well. It was the most brutal thing I've ever gone through in my life, but it makes you a better person.
Yeah, what's the old saying? If it doesn't kill you,
it makes you strong. Oh yeah, that's well, that was very true with me.
Well, coming from a farm, small-town moments to Eastern Illinois, and now you end up with the Pittsburgh Steelers training camp, and they had already had, what, 2 Super Bowl titles under their belt.
They had.
So you roll in, and you're looking at the steel curtain on the other side of the line, Joe Green, Dwight White, L.C. Greenwood, and Ernie Holmes. And I'm thinking that had to be a little wake-up call, I'm guessing.
Well, I mean, here's guys that I watched when I was in the 6th grade, and now I'm playing with them. It's a pretty daunting experience.
What? I mean, do you remember anything about that, going against these guys that were just unbelievable?
Yeah, I can remember one time, and I embellished the story just a bit, but it's at least partially true. I went against Ernie Holmes one time, and I had a good block because I was trying to make the team. I was trying to impress Chuck Noll, and I went back up to the line of scrimmage the next play, and he said, "Okay, Peterson, so you want to play football?" And he starts cranking up his forearm, which is about the size of my leg. He was a massive guy. He was out of shape, way out of shape, about 330 pounds. At the most right then, I weighed 245. I'm a converted tight end, and he cranked me across the face mask, and the lights went out temporarily. And he was a brutal player, and in my career, I had only one way to go, and that was up. And thanks to guys like John Kolb and Larry Brown, I was able to, hang in there and not quit again and make the team.
Well, I interviewed Art Rooney Jr. recently, and he was telling a story about Ernie Holmes, where I guess Bradshaw got hurt on an away game, and they had him on a stretcher, and they were having trouble going up steps, and he just picked Bradshaw and the stretcher up and started walking him. So I guess he was a pretty strong guy.
He was, on the field, probably the strongest player. In the weight room, he didn't do it as much, not that impressive. But had he chosen to, he probably could have done it there as well.
But I guess, and they had this 75th Steeler anniversary team, and they named, I guess, Joe Green the #1 Steeler of all time. I think they did.
Well, I think, most people agree. I mean, it's hard to say which Hall of Famer was the best. But everybody seems to agree that Joe Green was the heart and soul, and he was one of the earlier draft picks, of course. And it's just what he brought to the team as far as the leadership by example. It just spread to everybody else. And so when I arrive and I see everybody else doing their job the way they did it with the intensity that they did, I knew I had to step up my play as well. And I think the same is true at Upper St. Clair as the younger players see the older players set that example and raise the bar high.
Now, you played for the Rooney family. Art Rooney Jr. was involved with the draft side. Dan Rooney was very involved at that time. And Art Rooney Sr., the chief. Talk about the Rooneys and your thoughts about them and playing for them in the Steeler organization.
Well, they were a great family. And one of the better things that happened to me is when I was finally released by the Steelers, I played 8 years, that I was picked up by the Cleveland Browns, played a short time, and then I also spent some time with the Indianapolis Colts. They had just moved from Baltimore to Indianapolis. And having an opportunity to play for some other organizations was good because I know even more so now how special the Rooneys are. They're a wonderful family. They're good business people as well, but the family aspect to it is, you can look at their organization and you have people who start out to be whatever equipment men working in the front office because they hire men and women of integrity. They trust them. They develop a relationship, and they don't leave. It's kind of like Penn State and Joe Paterno and his group. So it's unique, and everybody has their stories about Mr. Rooney, and I'll tell you what, they're all true. I have mine as well. He was a phenomenal people person and a wonderful guy to work for.
Do you have any anecdotal stories that you can think of?
Well, I had a friend, Jeff Gossett, who graduated 1 or 2 years after me from Eastern Illinois University. He was a baseball player, although he punted for our team. And I think his first or second year, he led the nation in Division II football. It's 1AA today. And was an All-American, was drafted in football. He was also drafted in baseball. No, I don't know that he was drafted in football, but he tried the minors for a while. Art Rooney would come in, and I'd have Jeff in the locker room there. I believe it was in the off season. He'd meet him, and he'd say, "You know what, Jeff? The minor leagues are a tough place to be." And then he tried out for the Kansas City Chiefs, the San Diego Chargers. He made the last cut for the Dallas Cowboys a few times. Couldn't quite make it. 3 years later, he hooks on with the Chiefs, and he had a 16-year NFL career. Was in the Pro Bowl one of his last years with the Raiders. But anyway, Jeff brought in a young man named Pat Rooney, no relation, a kid from Eastern Illinois, a baseball player. It was in the minors, I believe. I'm not sure where he was playing, but every time I'd walk in, he'd say, "How's that Pat Rooney? How's that Pat Rooney?" Of course, he would remember them, but how's Jeff Gossett? I mean, years later, how's Jeff Gossett doing? And then finally, Jeff Gossett's playing for the Kansas City Chiefs. He come into Pittsburgh to play us here. Mr. Rooney came up to me and said, "I just went over to see Jeff Gossett." He said, "I want you to know that's the first time I've ever set foot in an opposing locker room before the game." Just things like that, but he never would forget a name. And he sincerely had an interest in what other people were doing and tried to help whatever way he could. And again, he helped Jeff. Jeff went in as instructional league, hit 9 home runs in 11 games and didn't get moved up, and that's when he put an end to minor league baseball and he focused on it. And Art Sr. Helped him with that decision, led to a wonderful career in the NFL as a punter.
Interesting. Now, you have 2 Super Bowl rings.
Yes.
Where are they?
Well, right now they're at my home. I'm packing up to move, as you know. So they happen to be in my home at this time.
Interesting.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned obviously you played for Chuck Noll. Talk about him.
Well, he was I like to say he was the consummate teacher. He was a big believer that he could teach football better than anyone else, and that would be probably true. He was a great communicator. He could say an awful lot in very few words, and he said it with intensity. He was a very intense man, intellectual, very intellectual. He was intimidating from that standpoint. He had authority because he had knowledge, and he could impart that to his players. One story I like to tell about him, and there's many, but I came back in 1987 to play in the strike year. They called me up, and so I'm playing. I played 2 games, then there's the 3rd game, and then the veterans report back in. And it was my last game, my last practice, and he knew I wasn't going to be around anymore. Although I look back and I think he wanted me to stay on at that time, but he knew I wasn't going to play anymore, and yet he stayed after practice with me and worked on, and I was playing guard then, and I was a tackle basically, but he was working on this one, I don't know if it was a pass set or this one technique, and I'm thinking, what is he doing? You know, he's working, spending time with me, and I'm not going to be here tomorrow. And
you knew you were going to be cut or something?
I knew I was going to be cut, and he knew it, and he just loved to teach. I think I saw him at where he was most happy in the strike year when he had all these young players in, because he thought he could teach them better than the rest of the National Football League, and that's when he was in his highlight, is when he was able to teach. And that's what coaching is. Coaches are the best, most passionate teachers on earth. They love their material, they love kids, and they love what they do. And certainly I found them to be most passionate about what they do.
And you also, your other coach, Dan Radakovich, he was your offensive line coach,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
He was one of them, I guess.
Well, he was, no, we only had one then, but he was my coach my rookie year. And then Raleigh Dotch came in my 2nd year, and he was there the duration of my career before he went to the Birmingham Stallions, I believe, of the World Football League,
Yeah,
was
something
it?
like that.
Was it?
So did you interface more with your offensive line coach, obviously, than Coach Noel, I would
Oh,
assume?
absolutely, and he was the quarterback's coach. But he was also the special teams coach, in which I was on every special team under the sun. So I had some contact with him there.
Yeah. And how about Raleigh Dotch and Dan Radakovich? Talk about them for a bit.
Well, you know what, Rad was incredible in that he was a great innovator, he changed the rules where pass blocking used to be like this, and there used to be a head slap. Now picture this, letting a guy get this close to you, I'm the offensive lineman, and they would just hit, it had to be abusive. Well, Radakovich got his guys, his offensive linemen, to extend, to punch and retreat and punch and retreat and keep a separation, therefore doing a much better job of pass blocking and using their athletic ability, which we had better athletes than most because that's how they drafted. So he was an innovator, and it was 2 years after he initiated that technique, it became legal. So how they got away with that for a couple years, it was not holding. They didn't hold. They never taught us to hold. They taught us to block properly. And he was just like he was with me at Eastern Illinois. He was like that with us in practice. The guys joked, it wasn't really a joke, that 1 year with Rad was Bad Rad, he was called. 1 year with Bad Rad was like 2 with any other club. He took a year off your lifespan in the NFL because he would have you practicing. You'd be doing your offensive team, and then when you were out, instead of resting like most people do, he'd have you in the back behind the huddle, hitting the bags, doing this. It was exhausting. He was a maniac. But because of him being there 1 year, I learned those techniques. They fit my physical abilities well, and I was able to make the team. Raleigh Dotch was an intense guy who I don't believe was an offensive lineman. He didn't have the innovation that Rad had, but he would just make you play with the fear of the Lord in you, and he didn't care exactly how you got it done, just so you got it done, and you better get it done. He would tell you how he wanted it, and if you didn't want to do it, that's okay. Just don't make any mistakes or give up any sacks or missed blocks.
Was Chuck Noll an offensive lineman?
He was.
So I guess he probably had his say with you guys.
He probably did some, yes.
Yeah.
certainly the blocking schemes and whatnot.
Now you played with what? Mike Webster at center.
Yes.
And who else was? Who did you play with?
Jerry Mullins was the right guard generally. Sam Davis, the left guard. Larry Brown, converted tight end, was a right tackle. Benny Cunningham at tight end. Randy Grossman at tight end as well. And John Kolb at the left tackle. So as I look back, I mean, it took me a long time to crack that lineup. And the only reason why I really did was because they started getting injured. As you get older, you get injured once in a while, and it takes you a little while to get over them.
The offensive linemen, do they have to be a close-knit group to perform, and how does that work?
I would think so, and you need to foster that as a coach, because we used to call ourselves kind of the whipping dogs of the team. I mean, you don't get a lot of glory, not that we want it or you look for it, but when things go wrong, especially with the offense, it's going wrong with the offensive line, because you and I could still run through a hole if it's blocked properly. At least we could get a couple yards, and if the pass protection breaks down, you can have the greatest skill people, and if you don't have a good working line, you're going to have problems.
You say John Cole became one of your best friends.
Yes.
And who else impacted you on that line?
Well, the work ethic of Mike Webster. He was not outworked by anyone. And that's hard for me to say because John Kolb would not be outworked by anyone. I mean, these guys were phenomenal. So I had some role models to follow. I thought I was a hard worker in the weight room and preparing for the next year. But until I saw what they did in preparation, then I kind of rethought what I was doing.
So they just took it to another level.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's well said. And the intensity to which they operated was high.
I guess that wins Super Bowls.
It does. It does. Yeah. And that intensity increases every day of the season, every week of the season, every playoff game. What you did last week was irrelevant. You need to do it harder and better the next week in order to keep winning, to keep in the game.
Interesting. Now, several years ago, we also had on our show another teammate of yours by the name of Steve Corson.
Yes.
And Steve came on, and this was after he had the health scare, and I guess was then out preaching the evils of steroids, and really trying to impact young people on why not to get involved with that and the health risks and so forth. And then he went on to have that unfortunate accident that took his life. Talk about him a bit and your thoughts about him and his life and how it.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts. Number one, we were drafted the same year. We were rookies together on the offensive line, and we were kind of the whipping dogs of the whipping dogs. We were the youngest members of the team, and so we forged a real good friendship. I have just lots of fond memories of him. I got to tell you up front, his death just crushed me. It came out of nowhere, as you know. It was a freak accident, and I still miss him, obviously, to this day. We had the opportunity to coach together at Trinity High School, where he really left his mark with our athletes there. I was the head coach, he was my assistant, and he did a great job with them. And we would find ourselves teaching and coaching as Chuck Noll did. I mean, I might say something and I go, oh my, that's just what Chuck said, because it was the truth. Yeah. There are fundamentals of everything you do, and in football, Chuck knew the fundamental truths of the game. Or he would say it, and I would look at him. We had a great time. We probably learned a new respect for Chuck, his knowledge of the game, his application of that knowledge to his players, and again, he was a tremendous role model for our athletes there. I just was reading a letter of one of the kids who was just saying through an email what an impact that Steve made during those years.
So it was quite a surprise, and I did not know you were that close to him.
Yeah,
so it must have really affected you.
It did, again, more so than any, and there's been many deaths from former players during that era. but I felt like someone punched me right in the stomach on that one, and because he would call me just out of the blue. He'd just say, "Hey Pete, what are you doing?" And he would be telling me what he was going to do, and he was passionate about everything he did, and I just missed that relationship with him.
I just thought him advocating to stay away from steroids was a great thing. He didn't have to do that, but he decided to do that. I guess the scare to his health really kind of got his attention with that respect.
Absolutely, and what's bad is he said that, right before his illness, as he called it, he said he was really getting his life together in that regard, and it was very unfortunate that that went on. But he spent every day after that point very productively. He spoke all around the country and made a tremendous impact.
What's your favorite Steeler memory, moment that you can think back? He won 2 Super Bowls.
I tell this occasionally. I can remember, coming to a team that had won 2 Super Bowls, and you see the veterans walking around with their Super Bowl rings. I have to tell you real quick that winning the national championship was my ultimate goal in college. Obviously, it should be everybody's. And I wanted a ring so bad. And the Dallas Cowboys showed me the most interest. And the Steelers drafted me, and that year the Cowboys went and beat the Denver Broncos. I said, that was my chance for a Super Bowl ring. Well, the next year in '78, we played the Cowboys. And, we ended up getting a ring, and that was wonderful. But going to the Orange Bowl the day of the game, we arrived on a bus, and there was just a mass of humanity around the stadium, and we couldn't get our buses close enough to drop off to get into the. And I can remember the policemen on horseback trying to move the people away to get in there. And then just kind of struck me, this is a pretty big deal, this Super Bowl. And, I felt like a member of the Rolling Stones going into concert or something like that. But it was, that was a highlight of my career because, I'd wanted a championship in college, didn't get it, wanted a championship in the NFL, and this was our first opportunity to do that.
And I guess being here, you say you've been in Pittsburgh 31 years?
Yes.
I guess being here, then you see how much the Steelers really mean to the city of Pittsburgh.
Well, I do, and I'd like to comment on that briefly, that the Steeler fans drowned out the Dallas Cowboy fans that day. And then it was no contest. When we went to L.A. the next year, well, no one's a native Californian, and they don't care. They just show up to see a game. They don't come to get involved in the game. And the Steeler fans it was a home game for us out there as well.
Which is ironic because they're playing almost in their backyard, Los Angeles Rams.
They were, absolutely. Anaheim's, I think we were playing the Rose Bowl. And you're right. You would think that would be the other way around. But well, that's why it's called the Steeler Nation, and you can find Steeler sports bars throughout the country. And believe me, it's appreciated and needed, and it's a large part of the success of the Pittsburgh Steelers are the fans.
Absolutely. Now, going from the Steelers into what maybe Chuck Noll used to say, your life's work,
correct,
so to speak. How was that transition for you, and how tough was it?
Well, it was real tough because I had spent my life preparing for the next football season. And I wasn't one of those skilled players that just showed up with natural ability. I could get involved in business in the off season. I wasn't lazy. So I had no idea what I wanted to do when I retired. And I tried construction for a while, for a couple years, and that didn't work out and it's a good thing. And I don't know where I got this, but I came up with the conclusion that I wanted to make a difference in the lives of young people, and I got back into education. I had a degree, fortunately, from Eastern Illinois, and it was one of the greatest decisions I've ever made. I became a assistant coach and teacher at Cannon McMillan High School in 1988. I made $18,500, never made less money, at least at the time, and enjoyed anything more. And that's what you can say about public education is you need to be there because you love kids and you have a passion for what you teach. And so it was the start of a wonderful career for me.
And what led you to Upper St. Clair?
Well, then I went from Canon-Mac to Trinity. I was a head coach there for 5 years. I was a teacher coach for 12 years. And it was at that point where Tunchilkin, a local resident in Upper St. Clair, he said, the AD's job's open. I think you should apply. And I never thought of myself as an AD. I thought of myself as a coach, but then it sort of dawned on me that an AD was nothing more of a coach of coaches. And I thought, well, I know what I would want as a coach. I know what I would want an AD to be like, and I tried to be that type of a person.
And what do coaches want? What do you think they want? And what did you give them?
Well, you know what, within reason, I would just, I know this might sound like a cliche, but I wanted to give them everything they felt they needed to succeed. It's different in different sports, but I wanted to make it the most level playing field or court or whatever possible. I know that I didn't always feel supported as a coach. I used to think, well, I don't mind not getting supported, but don't make it harder on me than you need to. In some places, it's hard to win. And I could name a few, but that's just being negative. But if you look around, if they're perpetual losers, and I don't mean just in the fact of winning and losing, I mean, if they're not competing the way they should, sometimes there's reasons from the top down in an organization why they don't get that done. And I know what it takes, and hopefully I brought some of that here to Upper St. Clair.
Yeah. Was it a tough transition for you going from teaching to this brand new athletic director job?
Well, what was a tough transition? It was tough. The learning curve was very high, and I never left the teaching field, Lee. And what's made it difficult for me is to teach and to be AD.
So you teach?
I do. I'm a .6 teacher, and I also was the full-time AD, which was a full plate and a half. And I think, fortunately, I think they're going in another direction, and my successor will be someone that just handles the athletics.
I see. Now, we talked briefly about prior to youth sports are much different today than when you were growing up. You started playing football in 9th grade. Mm-hmm. That's almost unheard of today.
It is.
It almost and they're much more organized at a younger age, very, very younger age. I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think it can be handled well. I don't think, let me talk about football, since we're talking about football mostly, that I don't think that most football coaches are really in favor of having 7-year-olds playing that contact sport. It's too easy for them to get a bloody nose and have a bad experience if you don't have the right guys coaching it. So, but they're afraid that they're going to lose them to other kids, to soccer and other sports. And there is some competition. You have to build an exemplary program, something that kids want to get involved with, and because there's many sports out there. So, although I don't think it's best, it's there, and I think, speaking of Upper St. Clair, it's done very well. Our coaches here do a great job of mentoring these kids along the way.
Well, the other aspect is the early specialization, the early pressure on kids to get into AAU teams and cup teams. And I think maybe you're seeing some burnout at younger, later stages to that. What are your what's your
Well, I have some
comments about
strong thoughts on that, and I hope that any parents that are listening now would take this to heart. That number one, we need athletes in all sports. Every coach wants athletes, and to make the best athletes, you need to cross-train. You can't repetitively do the same thing over and over and get better. We know that in sports science now, variety is really the way to go. So I think from that standpoint, it's really important. Cross-training makes you a better athlete. It prevents burnout. It helps prevent injury. When you do the same thing over and over, you're more likely to get hurt. So I am not a fan of the AAU stuff. I understand it, but I'm not a fan of it.
I see. The other difference today than maybe when you were playing as a young person is that parents' involvement is much more hands-on. than ever before. And I would assume here at Upper St. Clair, as an AD, that you've had your moments dealing with parents.
I have.
And I know that parents have their child's best interest at heart, but then coaches, I heard this said that a coach looks at his team through a megaphone from the small part out to the large picture, and parents, you turn that around, they look at the big area of the megaphone into the small, just their child. So they're both looking at different things, and I guess that can create friction.
It could, and that's a great word picture or analogy. And I would like to say that about the parents here at Upper St. Clair, they're phenomenal in their support of these young individuals, and that's good. The only time that they get a little too involved, this is what I would say: let your son or daughter compete. Get them involved, encourage them. They give them the best equipment and support them in every way. Our parents are the best. We have very few problems here. But if there's anything, when there is an issue, it's usually, if I could say one thing, let them compete. Let them go in there and become a better young man or woman and do it on their own.
So you've been pulled into some of those skirmishes, I assume.
Of course.
Yeah, and that's generally your message.
Well, and it might not be that direct and in those words, but I have never seen someone who has refused to quit, apply themselves, and compete, not come out better than they expected. And that's what it's all about, to earn it. And
it's life lessons.
It is, very much so.
It teaches you some great life lessons.
And that's a great one to learn.
Yeah, it really is, because life's not always going to go your way.
Absolutely.
And you can work your way out of it.
Yeah. You must have coached.
Well, I do coach. I have played. So, not where you played, but I played. But should the AD get involved if coaches, and here's another issue that's out there, coaches putting pressure on kids to play one sport because they want to win. So should the AD get involved in that?
Absolutely.
In what way?
Well, you know what? We're here for the kids. It should be an extension of the classroom. They should be able to experience as much as they can and still maintain an excellent grade point average as well. Academics are first. If they can play 3 sports and do it and keep their grades up and excel in the classroom as well as the fields, then the more the better. Because have you ever met someone that regretted they did something in school? No. They regret, I wish I would have played this. I wish I would have went out for that, and it never fails. And so if I counsel anybody, it's to that effect.
But do you hear of coaches doing that ever?
I hear rumors of that, yes, and I understand. And I understand about pressures to win. That's unethical, though. That's putting the kids in a bind in a way that it shouldn't be done.
Have you ever had to have conversations? We won't mention names, but conversations with coaches.
I could have.
Yeah.
I know I've heard it enough occasionally, but it's not usually. I'll use Danny Holzer as an example. He is one of the finest guys I've ever dealt with, and he's on everybody's side. You know, he wants what's best for the kids, and his teams are exemplary. So he does it. Others can do it as well.
Yeah, I've interviewed Danny several times, and I know there's been some pressure on him from different areas, and I just thought he handled it in such a class way.
He is a class act indeed.
Really. Now, the higher profile sports, I guess the highest profile sport here at Upper St. Clair is football, and Coach Jim Render. And talk about him. I was just talking to Mr. Callahan. I guess he was a retired teacher here for many years in the biology department. He was just extolling his virtues in terms of he doesn't have many Division I kids that come out of here, but yet he wins and wins and wins. You know, what are your thoughts about Coach Render?
He's just one of the best coaches, best high school football coaches in America. I know he regrets never getting to line up at the college level or pro because he believes he could do it there, and I'm sure he could. But what he has done here is, absolutely phenomenal. Small quad A school, and he just excels so well at what he does. And this year the win against North Allegheny, one we probably shouldn't have won, perhaps on paper anyway. The way they won it, it was just assured to me that we have one of the best coaches in the United States.
Yeah, That's great stuff. Now, Jerry Malarkey, their baseball coach, started a program called Athletes Taking Action, I believe.
Correct.
Yeah, and I'm going to do a show with them and his kids, but talk about him and that group that he started.
Well, I believe it was him and Amy Podobnik, a mother involved in the Booster Club, that put this together. I was behind it all the way because it's a mentoring program where they have the older members, athletes, take incoming freshmen and try to show them the ins and outs and what to stay away from, what to get involved in, and it's a positive way. Keep them away from drinking and such stuff as that, and get involved in a more positive thing. It's been highly successful. I'd love it to sweep the country. That would be great.
That's good. Now, you and I were both playing sports before girls' Title IX actually showed up. And it just seems to me, as having a daughter, that was just one of the best pieces of legislation that our federal government ever put forward, because it really put girls out there on the playing field, and boy, the life lessons that they've learned. It's just, do you feel as positive about that and the girls' opportunities here as I do?
Well, I do, and our girls' sports programs here are outstanding. The only time I dislike any sports programs is when they don't prepare to win at the best of their ability, and yet they might expect the same kind of support of other teams that do everything within the framework of the rules that they can do to succeed. So, but as far as Title IX goes, it's done a lot more good than bad, and it's had some negative effects. But
we're almost out of time. Couple quick comments. Your advice to athletes that want to try to make it at the next level?
Just to work hard, don't quit, and keep a positive attitude. Just those three ingredients, will guarantee that you will be the absolute best you can be, and you can live with that.
And your advice to coaches, whether it be youth or high school coaches, on how to best work with their kids?
Well, that's a tough one in a nutshell, but just to pass on communicate the knowledge of the fundamentals of the game, prepare them to win. I guess real quickly to work them very hard. You don't do them any favors when you're easy on them. That's a Lou Holtz quote, but I found that to be true. You can work to win, and the kids will benefit if you demand that of them.
And almost out of time. What would you like to say to Upper St. Clair as you're getting ready to?
Well, I would just like to let everyone know how grateful I am to have had this opportunity to serve as athletic director. I'm taking away a lot more than I've left, I'm sure, and that says an awful lot. It's a tremendous place to have worked.
Yeah. Well, I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much.
Future.
Thank you, Lee.
And best of luck to you.
Thank you.
And I thank you for watching. I ask you, please be an organ donor and give the gift of life. It's the best gift that you'll ever give. Thank you for watching. I'm your host, Lee Adams. Take care, everybody.